Hey everyone. I've been feeling kind of bad lately on the hind end of being busy as heck, so I've had to hold off on getting this video out because I wanted to make sure I was able to give it the careful consideration that it deserved. It is, after all, what amounts to the final romance scene with Astarion, and one I wasn't even really expecting. Because, I mean, just how many romance scenes can you get with one love interest? In games gone past, you were lucky to get a date and maybe one romance scene. If we're talking Bethesda games like Fallout 4, then you might only get a sigh and a fade to black.
I'm more tired now than when we went to sleep.
But apparently in Baldur's Gate 3, well, that means 4 romance scenes, and I am not complaining at all. I'm just kind of shocked by how spoiled this game is going to make me. And I feel kind of bad for all future games who try to cut corners in their attempts to match the majesty that is BG3. So this scene triggered for me right after Cazador's ritual. I think it actually happened as soon as I went to bed that night. Now, from my own experimentation, I've found that this scene is one possible outcome from the ritual and takes place when you don't have Astarion ascend. We'll just call it Path A going forward. The other alternative, or Path B, occurs when you have Astarion complete the ritual himself, and we'll cover that in another video entirely because Path A is the route I took first, and I would definitely consider it to be my own headcanon. So I'm going to finish that out until the end before going down Path B. I'm just going to play the whole scene out for you and then we'll talk about it afterwards. It's not super long and it's incredibly touching, so I feel I would do it a disservice to break the whole thing up into pieces. So let's just watch it.
I should probably start getting used to the shadows again. Who knows how long I have left in the sun? Maybe. But even if I could control it, it's a dangerous game. I'd spend every day waiting for something to go wrong, for the tadpole to find some new trick, reassert itself, make me a slave again. Maybe never seeing the sun again is just the price of freedom. I think I do. Assuming we survive, of course, because a horrible death is always just around the corner with you. There's something I'd like to show you, if that's all right. Something out in the city. I'll try to restrain myself if you do. Shall we? This way. It's not far.
The graveyard is appropriately silent. There isn't a proverbial soul around.
Nearly 200 years. And I never came back. Not since the night I woke up down there. I had to punch a hole in the coffin and claw my way through 6 feet of dirt. Then when I finally broke the surface, retching up dirt and congealed blood, Cazador was waiting. From that day on, I was his. Until today. Maybe. But he did take it. There's almost nothing left of the person I was. Just a name on a rock. For nearly 2 centuries, I stalked the streets like a ghost. Well, the person I was lay here. Dead and buried. Now I need to figure out who I am. What I want. I feel the same. You were by my side through all of this. Through bloodlust and pain and misery. You were patient. You cared. You trusted me when that was an objectively stupid thing to do. I feel safe with you. Seen. And whatever the future holds for me, I don't want to lose that. Thank you. Well, I should probably fix this. Cute. I've been dead in the ground for long enough. It's time to try living again. With everything that life has to offer. If a night of passion is an offer, I could be persuaded. You know, I didn't care for you when we first met, but I do now. Being with you is about more than lust or manipulating you into a tactical alliance. I love you. I love this. And I want it all.
Astarion approached me once I went to bed and was basically lamenting how he might have to get used to the shadows again and might not have much time left in the sun, which is kind of a crappy byproduct of taking this path, but I still think it's worth it regardless of that loss. There were a lot of choices that popped up next, and I couldn't help but wonder about at least a couple of them, but I wanted most to offer up some hope, like maybe we can find a way to control the tadpole. It's interesting to see his response here, though. It's not the kind of far-fetched nonsense about using the tadpole to his advantage that we might have expected from the early part of this game. No, this Astarion has matured much since the beginning, and he understands that even if he could control the tadpole, it would always have control over him at the same time. He mentions how it could make him a slave again, too, and muses that maybe never seeing the sun again is just the price of his freedom, which is also very cool to hear. Is that to say he finally feels free, maybe? I also found myself curious about whether he regretted the choice as well, and he says this.
No, I made the right choice. although I do regret the options I had.
I felt like this response was very satisfying, like he doesn't regret the choice, feels like it was the right one, but wasn't thrilled about being forced to basically pick between some really big extremes. When it came to the next dialogue choice, I couldn't help but pick the sappy one. I'll be with you either way. I hope you know that. It just felt like the most appropriate response for me. He replies simply and kind of sidesteps the serious nature of the conversation to yet another serious situation, which is whether or not we'll actually survive the mess we're in. I just thought it was funny to make light of everything, like, well, a horrible death is always just around the corner with you, but then he says he wants to show me something in the city, and I'm thinking, holy crap, are we going on a date? We've never really been on a date, have we? So by now I'm definitely excited and just kind of waiting to find out what's going to happen next. I couldn't help but flirt before we left, though, because you know I really struggle not to do that in just about every game I play. In BioWare games, if I see the heart, I must click. He seems to be a little annoyed by it with that little chuckle, but he's at least being classy about it. I think by now he must know that this is just like a Tav thing he has to deal with me. The camera shifts and it looks like we're in a graveyard? Well, that's not very romantic, but I mean, I guess he is a vampire, and if I learned anything from watching season after season of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, it's that Buffy sure as hell spent a lot of time skulking in the graveyard. So I guess we're not too far off here, right? While my initial response was to hang back and see what he was about to do, I couldn't help but go back and poke fun at him for bringing us to a graveyard. It almost goes back to the part he said earlier on, before we got to Baldur's Gate, about how Cazador lived in a super gothic building. He doesn't say much, but here it is.
Perhaps. But some things are classics for a reason.
I'm not sure what to expect, but then Astarion just starts talking, saying he hasn't been back to his grave not for 200 years, when he was first turned and woke up down there. It's unbearable to think that he had to claw through 6 feet of dirt, like it was some kind of fucked up rite of passage. I mean, I would have thought Cazador would have taken him back to his place, let him recuperate normally, but instead what happened? It's, well, one of two things. Either Cazador left his body after turning him, people thought he was dead and buried him, or Cazador made the grave for him and was responsible for burying him there himself, or, had his lackeys do it for him. It's more likely the first option, that he was just left alone to go through all of that by himself, which is just so messed up. And to think Cazador was just up there waiting for him, like some disturbed collector, treating people like possessions, and for all of that time, Astarion belonged to him. Until today. I don't know why, but I felt the most compelled to pick option 1 here, to say you never belonged to him and whatever he had, he took by force. It just felt important to me to separate Astarion's role in it versus what Cazador made him do. It's got to be confusing enough as it is, and even though I think the other options work too, I just liked this one a touch more. I just wasn't expecting what Astarion said in return, and it kind of made me misty-eyed when he states the fact that Cazador did take a lot by force, and that there was almost nothing left of who he used to be besides a name on a rock, which is just a sobering thought. As sad as it is, it's also poetic, though. I'm trying to hold back crying like a baby here because the scene is getting to me pretty hard already. Especially when he says that while he stalked the streets, the person he was laid here, dead and buried. I mean, that's some really rough shit, guys. But as sad as it is, there's also a sense of rebirth in his words, that everything he's been through, his death, his coming back to life, only to be dead again, but then ultimately a sense of coming back to life yet again. It's like everything has come full circle. He isn't the same person that he used to be, and probably never can be. So now that he's actually free of Cazador, he has to figure out who he is again and what he wants out of life, desires and needs that aren't just born from fear and survival, like a real life. I think it's hysterical that as serious as this whole talk has been, in between my tears and wiping them away that Astarion makes a smile at the end here, and Tav just smiles back like a stupid fool. I know by now these sorts of interactions have become just like Tavisms, but sometimes it really takes me out of the mood. Either that, or you can say Tav is just the biggest Astarion fan ever, and is just sitting there with a derpy smile in wait because they're so happy about all the things they're hearing. Okay, that aside, you know what I had to pick here, right? I mean, this is just me laid bare before you. I almost always pick the sappy choices when it's someone I really like, and this romance has been a long time coming, huh? So yes, I picked you're the person I love and the person that I want, because I think it's important to just say what you feel in these situations. And I am so rewarded by the beautifully honest response. It's almost like there was a breath released as he waited to hear what I would say. Oh, but I wasn't expecting him to go on his little rant about how I was by his side through everything, how I was patient and caring with him even through his worst moments, and how I trusted him when it was a stupid thing to do. And now as I write the script, I am definitely crying. You never know if you're going to cry when you actually read the script aloud, but you can see by proof of what I called the recordings that I was a mess the first time I saw this. And I think that's okay. I think blubbering during this scene is totally acceptable because it's just so powerful, you know? It's not often you get rewarded for standing by someone. It does happen occasionally, or else we'd all be alone and miserable. But more often than not, you actually learn to be colder with people because being naive is a crime that comes with severe punishments. But here, we can unabashedly feel the innocence of love and youth. There's no beware of heartbreak signs. It's just good shit that makes you feel like you just finished reading Pride and Prejudice, where Elizabeth Bennet and Mr. Darcy actually managed to find their way to each other, and you can feel so good about it. It's a great reminder that not everything in the world has to be shit. Romance doesn't have to equate to swiping right on Tinder or whatever the heck it is you kids do these days. It just seems like there's a lot of discontent in the world, though, when it comes to romance, and there has been even since I was young and dating. But at least this is not the case in Faerun. At least after all the ups and downs, you can find yourself with Astarion in such a beautiful relationship that there are literally zero complaints. And now that I've gone on what has probably become one of my typically famous styled rants, let's get back to the rest of the scene because it's not over yet and it actually gets better. The next line continues to hammer away at any bricks that might be left holding up my inner fortress walls, how he feels safe with me and seen, and that he doesn't want to lose that regardless of what might happen in the future. I just kept continuing with my ultra sappy responses, and he thanked me. Although I won't deny, I felt my sarcastic side really wanting to pick the option about how the tadpole must be chewing through his brain, and he said this instead.
If it has, it might be for the best.
It's short and simple, but I really love to see this side of Astarion. Next he says, I should probably fix this, and he takes a dagger out. I wasn't entirely sure what he meant to go about doing, but he takes the dagger and starts carving something into his tombstone. Now, you guys will have to tell me what you thought, because I wasn't entirely sure initially, because obviously this isn't a language I can read, but it appears that he added a new line to the grave, especially if you go back to the earlier shot, you can see that he basically added another line below it. And I'm thinking what he did was add like a new date with a new dash to kind of represent that he started a new life on that very day that he earned his freedom. It's a sobering feeling again as you watch him sit back and contemplate the myriad of emotions that must be running through his head, like the death of who he was, everyone and everything he knew, and letting all of that go. When the time came to pick another option, I felt kind of stupid, almost like a child who doesn't know what to say. Although technically, I guess a child wouldn't think about what to say. They would just say something. But I decided I would pick up a flower and lay it on the grave as a remembrance. I don't know why. I just felt like maybe I had done something stupid afterwards, though. He said cute, and the corners of his lips curled up just a little. But maybe it was an insensitive thing to do. Maybe it was just the right kind of thoughtful. It's hard to say. You guys will have to tell me what you think and what you chose to do. As Tav sits down beside him, Astarion makes quite another potent statement that he's been dead in the ground long enough and needs to try living again. I was kind of shocked when he then turned towards me and took my hands, talking about how he wants to live with everything life has to offer. I definitely understood his insinuations, but I felt a little confused by it. I didn't expect we were going to be celibate forever, but I didn't know that he would be interested after going through that kind of heavy shit. Then again, sometimes heavy shit is the best spice for passion, so who am I to judge? I decided to play it relatively coy, though, to maybe let him lead a bit, and just picked meaning. He clears it up, and we're both definitely on the same page here and talking about honks. So I'm like, well, I guess that sounds good to me, because honestly, I think my poor Tav has been a little starved during our time out. I also couldn't help but wonder what would happen if I picked the other options to say, like, on your grave. Absolutely not, because it does seem a little gross. But I'll save that for after we finish this branch. So next, Astarion makes a little mini confession. He says he didn't like Tav much when they first met, and I was like, man, you were doing so well until you said that. But he does carry the point home better in the next line, talking about how being together is about more than just lust or strategic partnerships, and that's when he hits me with the big whammy when he says he loves you, loves this, and wants it all. What really gets me here, though, is the way he leans in and his hand extends almost in a flourish and seems so tender when he grasps Tav's neck here, like he's touching a very cherished person. It doesn't feel forced or fake. It feels pretty freaking real, you know? It's funny then how it takes this turn from tender to F this shit, I've been waiting for a long time to do this right. And Tav makes that doofy smile again, trying to kill my mood. But Astarion is saving it with that look of just, what is that? It's so serious. Something like lust, but not lust. Whatever the hell that look is, it is legitimately smoldering through my soul at this very moment. And all of those concerns I had about having honks in a graveyard, well, yeah, that's just kind of fading to ash. Fucking hell. That was really good. You want to talk about feeling like you fought to earn someone's love? Man. Now, obviously, there are going to be a bunch of different outcomes here, depending on what you picked, which we'll explore a little more in a bit. But I think in terms of what feels the best all around, that this option is it. Even though the idea of being intimate is unexpected, I think it was actually the right emotional move, for me at least here. I know everyone is going to have their own opinion and expectation from the scene, but I personally view this as a sort of phoenix rising from the ashes kind of tale. He's no longer the old Astarion, the elf he was before Khazador turned him, and he's no longer the seductive stalker. He's not even the new person that the tadpole initially made him. He's something altogether new, and it does make sense, even from a poetic standpoint, that he might want to take back his own power and what being intimate might mean to him. It doesn't have to be lust or alliances, as he already mentioned. It can just be that he wants to start over with his favorite person, and there is a reason why spring signifies rebirth. It's not just the transition from the dead of winter to the growth of spring. It's also the reproduction that runs rampant in the spring. All of the animals now have a plentiful abundance of food, and they set out to make babies. And I think the cycle of life is really a big focus in the relationship with Astarion. I touched on it earlier, but at this point I'm tying it in with why I think the consummation makes sense here at the end. for me at least. It just feels like everything has come round full circle here. He's been reborn, and in a sense, even your relationship has been reborn. From the very point where he realized he wanted you to have something real and not just some fake BS. The whole thing is really beautiful, to be honest, and it makes me happy that I stood by him, even though countless commentators felt the need to tell me how evil and awful he was. Clearly, they were all right. But because I'm always curious about whether other options turn out better, and because I really had to know what would happen if you said on your grave, absolutely not, I went back and took a look.
We don't have to rush into anything tonight. We might not have forever, but we do have all the time we need. Unless we die horribly tomorrow, which is always a strong possibility. Come on, let's get back to camp. Who knows how long before the others go feral without us there to guide them.
It's honestly not a bad option either, even though I feel like it translates the sarcasm improperly. Like if I say something like that, I'd almost imagine him to say, well, we could go over here instead. But I do like the part where he talks about not rushing into anything. But the rest feels a little awkward to me, even though I'm sure it would be suitable for many other people who felt like maybe this was too soon. Then there was the other option to say, let's just stay here together.
Of course. That would mean a lot.
Which also feels kind of abrupt and not complete. I definitely think the initial scene was the best in this case. It just flows well with the whole idea behind the scene, which is to say actually living again and rebirth. If that whole scene wasn't enough to gobsmack you, then the next one will definitely do you in. I literally had a manual save that I called My Beautiful Astarion after I saw all of this. Not because he's physically beautiful, but because I found everything he said and did here to be just stunningly beautiful. I think this dialogue becomes available after you kill Cazador, but in my case I actually saw his romance scene first, so it happened afterwards for me. Let me play it for you, but I warn you, it is so stinking sweet that if you're like me, you're probably gonna cry like a baby all over again.
It feels ridiculous to still be thinking about Cazador. He's gone. I'm here. I won. But I still keep reliving everything that happened. Playing it over and over in my mind. Invigorating. Terrifying. All of the above. I'm still trying to understand it, really. I came so close to losing everything back there. To losing myself. Back at the ritual, all I could see was the power on offer and the safety it promised. I was so blinded by it. Just as Cazador was. But you saw something in me. Someone else I could be. Someone who could break the cycle of power and terror that started centuries ago. You saved me back there. I may not have appreciated it at the time, but I do now. Thank you. You did more than that. You believed in me. Believed I was enough. Just the way I am. When I look at my future, anything and everything feels possible now. And I get to share it with you as a partner. An equal. You saved me from myself. And let me walk a new path where I can be free. Truly, honestly, free. This is a gift, you know. Thank you. I won't forget it.
So, basically, Astarion is kind of annoyed at the fact that even after Cazador's demise, he's still thinking about the whole thing. He's still reliving the events in his head, going over every little detail. When I got the chance to talk, I was a little confused by some of the options. In my case, he never acted like someone unrecognizable, but that's because I managed to bypass the whole scene where you have to talk him out of the ritual. Still, it felt best to just ask, well, how does it feel? His response is incredibly honest, and it's also curious to note how he mentions that he came close to losing everything back there, including himself. It makes me worry a bit about what the outcome is if you actually have him complete the ritual, but we'll be visiting that in another video. It seems he finally understands, though, that he became just as power hungry as Cazador, even if it might have been for slightly different reasons. Oh, but then we get to the part that really gets me. It's like Tav Appreciation Week is here in Baldur's Gate 3, and Astarion is all over celebrating the occasion. The fact that he actually holds a candle to everything I've been feeling throughout this whole romantic adventure is just simply brilliant. Like, yes, I have actually thought all of this time that he had that potential, and not in the way I see so many people describing it, the whole I can fix him angle, which comes off as almost demeaning, but in the way that, well, how do I describe it? It's like cultivating a garden. You can't grow a radiant plant in the shade, it can't be starved of water, and it might even need the proper nutrients in its soil. You even have to watch out for parasites like hornworms, aka Cazador, who will come and literally clear off every single leaf from your tomatoes if you leave them unfettered. Ask me how I know, because it's happened. And thus, my plant analogy is complete. Astarion just needed care, security, and stability in order to thrive. That and helping to get rid of abusive jerkwads from his life. It's why picking the next response was so easy and felt so natural. It was, in my opinion, the perfect choice for me. And that was, you saved yourself. I just gave you a push. And then he caught me off guard because he focuses even more on all of these thoughts that I've had. He made it more personal, which is why I think it hit me so hard, you know? The thing that actually made me cry this time, though, it was like acknowledgement, but also that he saw through me by putting words to it all, by saying that I believed in him and believed he was enough just the way he was. And it's not just that, but the way that trust has affected him. You know, his whole outlook on life has changed. He thinks everything and anything feels possible, and he even seems excited to share it with you as an equal. But it keeps getting more and more emotional by layers, and I have to say the writing here is just so good because it feels natural. It's just like you're having a conversation with a real person, someone you've actually made this journey with. But it hit me so hard in the heart when he talked about how I saved him from himself, but mostly the part about how he can be free now, truly, honestly free. But the real coup de grace is when he brings it all full circle yet again. And like I mentioned from the romance scene, there is a huge cyclical theme present in Astarion's relationship. But if you guys remember, after the first time you allow him to feed off of you, he says,
"This is a gift, you know. I won't forget it."
And now he says the same thing yet again.
"This is a gift, you know. Thank you. I won't forget it."
But this time, the way he says thank you is just so touching. No, it's rewarding. Like better than any legendary loot I could ever get. Man, I mean, it's just too good. And for those of you who have already seen this, tell me you weren't crying your head off during both of these scenes. I mean, it was just so emotional for me in a good way. I mean, all of the right emotions, but it was heavy, and it's just crazy feeling something like this in a video game. It's just perfect all around. There is one last thing to note here, though, and that's the relationship dialogue option and how it changes when you ask, "What are we to you?" after this whole thing takes place. Let me play it for you.
Nothing special, of course. You're only the first person who I truly care for.
Oh my God, guys, I love it. It's just so adorable. It's almost too much. So what did you guys think of all this? There's still some scenes left for the romance at the end of the game that I want to talk about. And there's still the whole other path B option of letting him complete Cazador's ritual, as well as a whole bunch of other random things you can do in between. But this was the pinnacle moment for the Astarion romance, in my opinion, and I was so completely happy with it. I'm honestly very curious to see how the other romances go now, because I'm wondering if they'll all be equally as good, or if he is just the best and there's no matching it. I'm working on romancing Gale in my stream game at the moment, so I guess we'll see how that goes. If you enjoyed the video, consider subscribing, as there is going to be a huge slew of new BG3 content coming out over the next few months, possibly years. I mean, there's a lot. Thanks to my Patreons for the support, and if you'd like to help support the channel too and get access to the private Discord and a whole other chunk of content on Patreon, then head over and make a pledge. I'll see you guys later.